Haji Bhaji Khalsa Bhaji Fateh Ji ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਜੀ ਆਇਆਂ ਨੂੰ once again welcome to Khoj Gurbani. So far what we've done is we began with the Mool Mantar, or at least what we call the Mool Mantar, just in case someone has an objection to that. And ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਓਂਕਾਰ ਤੋਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਅਕਾਲ ਮੂਰਤ ਤੱਕ, the last time around we wrapped up with Akal Murat. So let's start with the term that comes after Akal Murat. So I'll just sort of recite it so that it settles our mind a little. Ek Oankar Satnam Karta Purkh Nirbhau Nirvair Akal Murat Ajūnī Sarvang Gur Prasad. With that, I will turn over to ajūnī and Sahivang. I think we can take these terms collectively, but I want to throw it out there. Does anyone want to start with ajūnī, and of course feel free to pull in the term Sahivang as well. So it's open. Does anyone want to chime in first?
Or I can kick it
Haji,
off.
Haji, please go ahead. I would love that.
So, I think I would like to take this in the same context ਕਿ ਜਿਸ ਅਕਾਲ ਪੁਰਖ ਦੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਦੇ ਆ ਰਹੇ ਹਾਂ ਹੁਣ ਤੱਕ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕਰਤਾ ਪੁਰਖ ਹੈ, ਉਸ ਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਹੋਂਦ ਵਾਲਾ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਅਕਾਲ ਪੁਰਖ ਨਿਰਭਉ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਨਿਰਵੈਰ ਹੈ. I think in the same context we have to say ਕਿ ਉਹ ਅਕਾਲ ਪੁਰਖ ਜੂਨਾਂ ਵਿੱਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਆਉਂਦਾ, ਭਾਵ ਕਿ ਉਹਦੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੋਂਦ ਹੈ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਉਹਦਾ ਐਗਜ਼ਿਸਟੈਂਸ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਜਨਮ ਮਰਨ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਹੈ. So I would like to consider the same thing ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹਦੀ ਹੋਂਦ ਜਾਂ ਵਾਹਿਗੁਰੂ ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਐਗਜ਼ਿਸਟੈਂਸ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਥੇ ਫੀਲ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ, ਮਹਿਸੂਸ ਕਰਨਾ ਹੈ, ਜਾਂ ਬਾਣੀ ਦੇ ਮੁਤਾਬਿਕ ਉਹਦਾ ਐਗਜ਼ਿਸਟੈਂਸ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਮਝਣਾ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਐਗਜ਼ਿਸਟੈਂਸ, ਉਹ ਹੋਂਦ ਜਨਮ ਮਰਨ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਹੈ.
Haji, does anyone want to comment on that or add to that? I would suggest that we think in terms of the fact that the word laga, this is the sound which kind of negates the word negative connotation denda. So akal hoya, ajūnī hoya, and I think those terms they are referring to time and the sort of terrestrial sort of context in which we live. I think of it as the three-dimensional world that we inhabit. I think it is trying to tell us that this entity, I shouldn't even say it is an entity, or that Ik Oankar is really, to Harpreet Singh's point the last time, transcendent and immanent. And in fact, transcendent, immanent, and everywhere in between, I would add. So I think if we keep that in mind and try and think in terms of these terms, it might be a little helpful. Anji, anybody else, please? I would encourage all of you to please speak up. This is a dialogue and a discussion, not a monologue. Harpreet Singh, are you online?
Haji, I'm mute te saam.
Do you want to provide some context, add to, or at least correct what I may have said?
Yeah, I think we've discussed this before, so I didn't want to belabor the point, but I think the fact that Guru Nanak is envisioning the Akal Purakh in a certain way that is not done by the dominant tradition, which is Hinduism, in which ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰੱਬ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਜੂਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਪੈਂਦਾ ਹੈ, ਪਰ ਇੱਥੇ ਸਿੱਖੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਰੱਬ ਜੂਨਾਂ 'ਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਪੈਂਦਾ. ਉਹ ਇਸ ਤੋਂ it's unimaginable to even give God such human attributes. So I think that would be the main point. But when you add Sahibang, that God is self-existent, and so the in Islam, incidentally, we have a very similar concept that a concept है शर्क दा इस्लाम ਵਿੱਚ ਸ਼ਰਕ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਲੋਕ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਰੱਬ ਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਸਨ ਹੀ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਕੋਈ ਇਕੁਅਲ ਹੈਗਾ ਜਾਂ ਰੱਬ ਨੂੰ ਕੋਈ ਹਿਊਮਨ ਐਟਰੀਬਿਊਟ ਦਿੰਦਾ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਉਹ that person is guilty of this of shirk. So I think those are very important similarities that we see in Sikhi and Islam, that both religious traditions accord God as a supreme being this place that is extraterrestrial, but at the same time someone who is engaged in the processes of the world. So I'll let others add something to that.
Hanji, thanks. I do want to actually question some of what you are saying, and I obviously, am not quite that versed in the Hindu tradition or the Sikh tradition. But when you say that, and I would like to sort of make a note of it so that we can at some point discuss the real differences between Hindu thought. So when you say Hinduism or Hindu thought, the first thing that jumps at me is that it is really a conglomeration of many different thoughts of school. So are they all of the same opinion? Are there not notions within Hinduism of a God that more or less, looks like the God that Guru Nanak has envisioned? These are some of the things that pop into my mind. Because it seems to me that there may be similar thoughts present in the stream or the spectrum rather of Hindu thought as well. But I would like to make that maybe a discussion at some future point. I would just like to suggest that.
So, I mean, perhaps I can clarify that I'm looking at the context of the Punjab specifically, and the Vaishnava thought or the Vaishnavas are the dominant you could say religious group, and that's where the Avtarvad comes in. But you're absolutely right that Hinduism, this term is a colonial term which includes many different traditions. And if we look at a tradition like Advaita Vedanta, for example, in that kind of a context, God is, a neutral principle, which is not necessarily something that is in human form.
Right. Yeah. I appreciate your clarification on that, and because I do get confused with this sometimes, because sometimes I think we are very emphatic about, what Hinduism is, and it seems to me it's really a fairly complex system. And we need to understand what are we pointing at. So your clarity here is much appreciated, that you're thinking in terms of the Punjab, the Vaishnav tradition, and your reference to the Advaita Vedanta tradition as represented by the Upanishads, I guess, is true. But nonetheless, I think this would make for an interesting subject down the road somewhere, because I'm making a note of this on the side, because it seems to me it is important for us to really understand how Guru Nanak's revelation or Guru Nanak's sort of philosophy and message and teaching, how is it radically different? I mean, to me, it is radically different in some ways, and we need to understand what that difference is.
Right, Ravinder, this is Dilpreet again. See, I was reading somewhere, one difference is, I think Hinduism also believes in God as a creator. But then there is a little difference. It is believing that the God created this universe and this earth and everything, but the components existed before that. I think that is one of the difference. We are saying that God is there in those components like Hava, Pani, so that is one difference I see.
Anji, your point is much appreciated. ਅਸੀਂ ਇਸ sidetrack ਨਾ ਹੋ ਜਾਈਏ ਇਸ discussion ਵਿੱਚ, मैं सिर्फ इतना कहना सी कि I've made a note of this, and I think if you all, the people who are online, agree with me, at some stage, I don't know when, but at some point, I think it would be worthwhile to actually go back and try and understand how Guru Nanak's message is really radically a radical departure from the stream of thought that he inherited as well. I mean, after all, he was born into a certain milieu and a certain ambiance. So I just want to bring this out, that maybe this would be a good subject to discuss somewhere down the road. हाजी कोई होर गल ऐड करोगे तुसी अजूनी ते सहबंग ते चलिए नहीं ते, and then we can wrap it with Gurprasad.
I think one thing we must all be very clear: if we are really interested to see the uniqueness of radical differences or radical contribution of Guru Nanak to humanity, I'm not talking about any particular religion here, then we will have to search and open up Gurbani from Gurbani for some time, until we establish a strong footing of Guru Nanak's Bani from the Guru Granth Sahib itself. As long as we will keep on comparing one piece or the other with other religion, we probably would be getting more messy and more into a trap kind of thing where we are as similar as others are. I would like to point out here one more thing, that when the British visited Patna Sahib, Gurudwara Sahib, way back in 1789 or something like that, before the colonial period started for us, and after that ਹੋਰ ज़्यादा नुकसान हुंदा रहा या miscommunications आउंदे रहे ने. That person has, and Professor Ganda Singh ਦੀ किताब ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹਦਾ mention है, that person ਮੈਨੂੰ ਉਹਦਾ ਨਾਮ ਭੁੱਲਦਾ ਪਿਆ, he considers कि this is a Sikh college. So my point always is that in the past 200 years, from being a student, we have turned out to be a faith followers. Two, we have turned out from being researchers, which the Guru Nanak brought 500 years before the Western world realized what exactly is research. Guru Granth Sahib ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ word ਅੱਖਰ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਖੋਜ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਭਰਿਆ ਪਿਆ, ਲੇਕਿਨ ਵੈਸਟਰਨ ਵਰਲਡ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਰਿਸਰਚ ਵਰਡ ਹੈ, ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅੱਜ ਅਸੀਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਕਾਮਨਲੀ ਯੂਜ਼ ਕਰਦੇ ਹਾਂ, ਇਹਦੀ ਹੋਂਦ 1850 ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਹੀ ਹੈ. ਇਹਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਹੋਰ ਸਿਨੋਨਿਮ ਹੈਗਾ ਇਨਵੈਸਟੀਗੇਟਰ, ਉਹ ਵੀ ਵਿਰਲਾ ਜਿਹਾ ਯੂਜ਼ ਹੋਇਆ. ਤੁਸੀਂ ਐਨਗ੍ਰਾਮ ਗੂਗਲ ਦਾ ਦੇਖ ਲਓ, 1800 ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ whosoever has used these words. Whereas ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ research, ਸਿੱਖੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ learnership, studentship, all these things are very much imbued into Sikhi, and that is where the empowerment of the learner comes. So I would suggest that we should, I'm sorry, I'm wrapping up, we should focus more on searching the word ajūnī even from the Guru Granth Sahib itself, rather than starting comparing to the outside world.
Haji, your point is well taken, Biji, which is why I suggested that at some point down the road, some point, I wasn't trying to suggest tomorrow or the day after, but it's important at some point to be able to locate your own self in relation to the world around you. And of course, you have to be aware and knowledgeable about the fundamentals of your own principles before you do that. But I think that at some point down the road, perhaps, we'll all have the opportunity to do some sort of a comparative study, not with a view to sort of criticize for the sake of criticism, but just for the sake of understanding. It is nothing more than being a student. So even students tend to look at different thought processes, different schools of thoughts, just for the sake of understanding. And we are Sikhs, so I think it behoves us to really investigate what other belief systems out there are talking about. And you're right. I mean, we shouldn't get stuck in belief systems. But in you, मैं गल कहनी सी कि somewhere down the road, ਅਸੀਂ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ. Okay, let's not get sidetracked on that. Ajūnī बारे भी अगर तुसी गल करनी है with reference to Gurbani, please feel free. We'll stop and wait to hear you.
I would appreciate in case HKVG or anybody can enlighten me more on how Dasam Pacha has used the word ajū hai. So I'm still stuck up. I'm not still clear. I'm trying to explore this word without the ni added to it. Ajū hai. I just want to explore that part. If somebody could add on that, I'll really appreciate that. I'm stuck up there.
What's your sticking point?
ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇਹ ਆ ਜੀ ਕਿ I want to see these words even aju separated from ni also. So that's how, I don't know. I'm still exploring this option, like I tried to do with the Nirpa, Nirvair, Akal, and Murat, like Murat. And I'm pretty convinced on, I have found a lot of evidence from the Guru Granth Sahib where the mu is separated in a very emphatic manner from the one who is all imbued the nam part. So, but Ajut, I'm not sure. I have still to do more exploring. But if Sangat could help me on that, I'll appreciate.
So, do you think that this implies a different meaning, or the fact that it's not using ni, the Supacha is not using that, makes it something different, or are you considering the fact that this could be perhaps the demands of poetry as well, or what is it that you're really thinking about?
I don't bring whether it is the Bani of the Sampacha or Guru Granth Sahib at the level where it is just written for the poetry's sake. I explore it from a very deep, profound meanings in if they have even added say Hari Bihari or Onkar Galankar, or even separation of words. So I need more help in exploring this word aju, ajūnī and ajū hai, comparing these two. So if anybody could give their take on that, I'll greatly appreciate. I want that we should get the meanings right from the Guru Granth Sahib. It is, I think it's called Sahaj Parnali, and Dr. Taran Singh of Punjab University has written it as one of the methods of translation or trying to understand the meaning of Guru Granth Sahib. I personally recommend this as a strong methodology. Once, as you were asking also and suggesting that we need to explore Guru Nanak's Bani's Vilakhanta, the unique things, and that we can only establish when we explore the Bani with Bani. That's how. And I'm not very happy or very convinced with the understanding of the word ajūnī. So I'm still at, because the very next word they will say is sabhan. So that's my
Vijay.
Ji.
Hello Vijay.
Vaheguru ji.
विजय गुरबानी दी तुख हगी ना सो मुख जलो जित कहें ठाकुर जोनी
फिर बोलो जी मैं
सो मुख जलो जित कहें ठाकुर जोनी
सो मुख हाँ ठीक है जी
so this is from Gurbani clearly saying it's Juni
so yeah ठीक है जी ठीक है
it explains
मैं yeah definitely it explains जी
ਵੀਰ ਜੀ ਚਰਨ ਸਿੰਘ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬੰਗਲੌਰ ਤੋਂ ਗੱਲ ਖਤਮ ਕਰ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਹੋ ਆਪਣੀ he is trying to address you your concern hear him out
so all that I am saying is ਕਿ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਇਹਨੂੰ ਅੱਗੇ ਵਿਸਥਾਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਪਈ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ and then it's an obvious question ਕਿ ਅਗਰ if it doesn't come in cycle of life and death then how is it then he says to have him and ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਕਾਫੀ ਥਾਂ ਤੇ ਕਲੈਰੀਫਾਈ ਕਰਦੀ ਹੈ ਆਪੀ ਨੇ ਆਪ ਸਾਜਿਓ ਆਪੀ ਨੇ ਰਚਿਓ ਨਾ ਹੈ ਨਾ so I think ajūnī and swabhang are obvious corollaries ਕਿ ਇਹ ਹਸਤੀ ਹੈ ਇਹ ajūnī ਹੈ ਅਗਰ ਸਵਾਲ ਅਗਾ ਅੱਛਾ ਅਗਰ ajūnī ਹੈ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਹੋਂਦ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿੰਜ ਆਇਆ ਉਹ ਆਪੀ ਨੇ ਆਪ ਸਾਜਿਓ I thought that was very clarifactory in Gurbani itself.
ठीक कह रहे हो जी ठीक कह रहे हो
Does anyone else want to add to this? So,
जी सह पानू की लोगे फिर तुसी चरमर जी सह पानू की लोगे जी
ਉਹ ਤੇ ਆਪੀ ਨੇ ਆਪ ਸਾਜਿਓ ਆਪੀ ਨੇ ਰਚਿਓ ਨਾ ਉਹ ਤੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਚ ਆਇਆ ਜਿਵੇਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਵੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਚੋਪੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜਬ ਉਤਕਰ ਕਰਾ ਕਰਤਾਰਾ ਪ੍ਰਜਾ ਧਰਤਬ ਦੇ ਅਪਾਰਾ self created again and self assumed.
But here we are talking about कि वो जून च नहीं आया होया. The question is not created by itself. There's no doubt about that.
पर गुरबानी बिल्कुल क्लैरिफाई कर दिए सो मुख जलो जित कहें ठाकुर जो तो वो ते जूना चाहता ही नहीं है.
मैं पंक्ति नोट कर लिया जी. I'll explore it.
मैं सोचता कि it is in sharp contrast to the dominant religion जिਵੇਂ ਹਰਪ੍ਰੀਤ ਪੀਰ ਜੀ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ sharp contrast to the dominant religion in the area as well as the dominant belief ਕਿ ਕਦੀ ਇੰਜ ਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਕਦੀ ਉਂਝ ਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਦੀ ਰਾਮ ਬਣ ਕੇ ਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਦੀ ਕ੍ਰਿਸ਼ਨ ਬਣ ਕੇ ਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਹੈ. It's also I thought a very dominant in contrast to a very dominant belief ਕਿ Buddhism ਵਿੱਚ ਉਹ ਬਾਰ-ਬਾਰ अलग रूप धारण करके आ रहे हैं अलग-अलग लामा बन के आ रहे हैं. So I thought this was a very very important point that Guru Nanak Padshah was making, that he is not in this cycle of coming and going. And then when he said that so mukh jalo jit kahe Thakur Joni, very very clarificatory.
ठीक है जी मैं ए वाला
I think you've got cut off. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me, Ji?
Hanji, now I can.
Okay.
So did Charan Singh Veer ji from Bangalore actually did he finish, or does he still have something else to add?
Yeah, I'm through.
Acha ji. Thank you very much for that clarity. I think Veer ji, the fact that the two terms are placed side by side have a great deal of significance because one clarifies the other. To your point, je o juna nahi aanda te o hond vich kiਵੇਂ ਆਇਆ ਉਹ ਹੋਂਦ ਵਿੱਚ I would go so far to say ਕਦੀ ਆਇਆ ਹੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਹ ਸਦਾ ਹੈ ਹੀ ਸੀ. So ਆਪ ਹੀ ਨੇ ਆਪ ਸਾਜਿਓ I guess is another way of explaining that ਕਿ ਉਹ ਆਪਣੀ ਹੋਂਦ ਆਪ ਹੀ ਹੈ self illumined so thanks for that clarity. Charan Singh Veer ji from Toronto.
Perfectly fine. Thank you so much.
Hanji.
But I think the definition of June is probably what is confusing sometimes. What do you classify as June? Is it only the coming in live like we do and other animals, or the plants and everything? Because he's pervasive. He's everywhere. We also say that, right? So that probably the definition of June needs more clarity to understand before we take the next put a negative connotation to that concept of June and say he's ajūnī.
Yeah, I think I resonate with you.
Hanji, I appreciate that, Manpreet Veerji. Harpreet, do you want to add anything to this, or Harvinder or others online?
Well, my question would be that it appears that the word is consistently used for sentient beings. So you know, ਜਿਹੜਾ 84 ਲੱਖ ਦਾ ਇਹ ਬਾਰ-ਬਾਰ ਬਾਣੀ ਚ ਆਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਜ਼ਿਕਰ, and we don't take it literally because we know there are not 8.4 million species, but ਉਹ ਹਿੰਦੂ cosmology ਚ ਹਿੰਦੂ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਟ੍ਰੈਡੀਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਇਹਦਾ ਜ਼ਿਕਰ ਕਰਦੀ ਬਾਰ-ਬਾਰ, ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਗੁਰੂ ਸਾਹਿਬ ਉਹੀ numerical value ਲੈ ਕੇ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਸਮਝਾਉਂਦੇ ਨੇ. But the point is that the idea of June 84 lakh Juna is quite pervasive. So unless there is something that you think may mean different than what is being implied in that context. I don't know how else you would take it.
Yeah, my point is only that I think it's confusing a little bit that Janam Maran to wo rehta hai, self-existent, agreed. Self-existent hai, Janam Maran to rehta hai. Then his presence, like we were saying, he's imbued everywhere. So what comes in that Janam Maran?
जिस तरह के हरप्रीत ने किया है, and I would like to just sort of pipe in here, sentient beings, or I see it as the species. जिन्नियां भी जूना बनाइयां ने, I see them as creation in its totality. I also think of Juni as being the process of creation, this whole cycle of being born, of living, of dying, and the various methods through which living beings emerge. I mean, there are different ways of being created. So it's sariyan odiyan banaiyan. And by the way, Harpreet, 84 lakh di tu gal ਕੀਤੀ hai. I read something very interesting a few days ago. You probably, and most of you probably know about Edward Wilson, the biologist, Edward O. Wilson. He was mentioning that biologists now are of the opinion there are around 8 million species out there. But that was just an aside.
I mean, I wouldn't know, but generally, consensus है रहा कि 8.4 billion species दुनिया च नहीं हैगियां. But if biologists are saying that, so it could be possible. So
I just have to go by what Wilson is saying, since he's a very respected biologist. I was reading something that he was talking about. I forget the context, but I can say whatever the hell I want to. But he was talking seriously though. But when and I do take your point, 84 lakh da sort of symbolism hai कि अनगिनत जूना ने. It is just a way of a metaphor sort of for explaining. ਤੇ ਵੀਰ ਜੀ ਫਿਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਅਜੂਨੀ ਤੋਂ ਅਗਾਂਹ ਵੱਲ ਚੱਲੀਏ ਹੁਣ ਕਿ
ਵੀਰ ਜੀ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਗੱਲ ਅਜੂਨੀ ਹੈ. ਹੈਲੋ ਵੀਰ ਜੀ.
ਹਾਂਜੀ ਹਾਂਜੀ.
ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਕੌਣ ਹੈ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਅਜੂਨੀ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈਗਾ. ਮੇਰੀ ਰਾਏ ਵਿੱਚ ਅਕਾਲ ਪੁਰਖ ਤੋਂ ਇਲਾਵਾ ਹਰ ਚੀਜ਼ ਅਜੂਨੀ. ਪਹਿਲੀ ਗੱਲ ਤੇ ਹਰ ਚੀਜ਼ ਜਨਮ ਮਰਨ ਦੇ ਗੇਟ 'ਚ ਹੈ. ਯੂਨੀਵਰਸਿਸ the universe can come up and collapse.
ਜੀ ਜੀ.
The only identity who is not born is Akal Purkh. It's not only the animal kingdom or the plant kingdom. I think anything that exists, anything that is visible, anything which is in Sargun Roop, everything is coming and going.
Ji, ji.
So this is the only identity or only entity that is beyond this. So I would go beyond what we think is living. It's not only the plants and animals. I think it's anything that is visible.
जी.
ਹੁਣ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਗੁਰਬਾਨੀ ਤਾੜਨਾ ਕਿੱਥੇ ਕਰਦੀ ਹੋਏਗੀ, ਪਰ I'm not sure ਗੁਰਬਾਨੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਤੁਕਾਂ ਕਿ I wish people like Ravel Singh ji was here ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਗੁਰਬਾਨੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਯਾਦ ਹੈ, but ਕਈ ਥਾਂ ਤੇ ਆਂਦਾ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਜੋ ਦ੍ਰਿਸ਼ਟਮਾਨ ਹੈਗਾ ਇਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਨਾਸਵਾਨ.
I think that is pretty clear. There's no doubt about that.
So it's that entity only, और ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹਸਤੀ ਹੈ ਜਿਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ ਕਹਿ ਆਏ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਐ ਵੇ ਉਹ ਵੇ ਅਕਾਲ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਨਿਰਭਉ ਹੈ, ਨਿਰਵੈ, ਉਹ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਐਂਟੀਟੀ ਹੈ ਸਿਰਫ ਉਹੀ ਐਂਟੀਟੀ ਜਨਮ ਮਰਨ ਦੇ ਗੇੜ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਹੈ.
ਜੀ. Point well taken. I think we can move on to Sahibang.
But we also say jo dise so tera roop. ਇਹ ਵੀ ਆਂਦੇ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਵਿੱਚ.
ਉਹ ਸਰਗੁਣ ਰੂਪ ਹੈ, ਜੋ ਦਿਖ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ ਉਹਦਾ ਸਰਗੁਣ ਰੂਪ ਦਿਖ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ. ਉਹਦੀ ਹੋਂਦ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਨਿਰਗੁਣ ਔਰ ਸਰਗੁਣ ਦੋਨੋਂ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ, ਪਰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹਦੀ ਕ੍ਰੀਏਸ਼ਨ ਹੈ, ਜੋ ਉਹਦਾ ਸਰਗੁਣ ਰੂਪ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਦਿਖੇ ਜਾਂ ਨਾ ਦਿਖੇ, ਮਤਲਬ ਉਹ ਆਵਾਜਾਈ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੱਗਾ ਰਹੇਗਾ। ਪਰ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਉਹ ਆਪ ਹਸਤੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਸਿਰਫ ਦਸ। ਔਰ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਅਗਲੀ ਵਾਰ ਆਇਆ ਤੇ ਮੈਂ ਉਹ ਗੁਰਬਾਣੀ ਦੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਤੁਕਾਂ ਹੈ, ਜਿੱਥੇ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਨੇ ਕਿ ਜੋ ਜੋ ਦ੍ਰਿਸ਼ਟਮਾਨ ਹੈਗਾ ਉਹ ਸਾਰਾ ਜਾਏਗਾ।
जो सो बिनस है परों आज के काल।
ਹਾਂ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ।
ਇੱਕ ਮੈਂ ਹੋਰ ਪੁੱਛਣਾ ਚਾਹਾਂਗਾ ਜੀ, ਇੱਥੇ ਕਲੈਰੀਫਾਈ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹਾਂਗਾ, ਕੈਨ ਵੀ ਸੇ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਨਿਰਗੁਣ ਸਰੂਪ ਹੈ ਉਹ ਅਜੂਨੀ ਹੈ ਔਰ ਸਰਗੁਣ ਸਰੂਪ ਜੂਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈ? Can we conclude from here that the Nirgun Swarup is Ajuni, whereas the Sargun Swarup comes in those cycles of birth and death?
The problem with our argument is that we are assuming that the Sargun form is the totality of Vaheguru, but in totality is not Vaheguru. Vaheguru is far more extensive.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess that's the only caution there.
Makes sense.
हम देखो जिसे कहते हैं ना, आप ही ने आप साजियो, आप ही ने रचियो नाव। That's why I feel that he is beyond all this, or God is beyond all this. पहली गल ते आपने आप नू साजिया है, फिर उन्हें नाम ही साजिया है, तो जेड़ा ना है वो दा डेरिवेटिव आ गया ना। तो मैनू लगता है कि हरप्रीत वीर जी जो कह रहे हैं कि ही इज मच बियॉन्ड इवन आवर कॉम्प्रीहेंशन, ते मैनू लगता है जो वर्ड नाउ है वो अपने आप ही निर्गुण है। तो यह कहना कि सरगुण तो ठीक है, नासवान हो जाता है, निर्गुण का की होंदा है, आई डोंट नो, बट ऑल आई नो इज एनीथिंग दैट एग्जिस्ट अदर देन दैट एंटिटी, everything is in the cycle of coming and going. Maybe we need to think more about this Nirgun thing.
I have one question here. Is there any existence of that entity outside of this existence? Can that be felt or seen, or because I think that is again we are contradicting, right? The way I understand is that the existence of that entity or God is in its existence only, it is not outside anywhere else.
देखो जिहड़ी गल असीं करता पुरख दी कहने आ, करता द क्रिएटर, पुरख जिहड़ा उहदे च पूरिया होया, तो ਇਹਦਾ मतलब ਇਹ नहीं कि जिहड़ी क्रिएशन है उस तो अलावा वो चीज नहीं हो सकती। ਉਹਦੀ होंद जिहड़ी है क्रिएशन ते नासवंद है, दिख रही है। सो क्रिएशन ਜਿਹਦੇ ਚ ਪੂਰਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈ, ਜਿਹਦੇ ਚ ਭਰਿਆ ਪਿਆ, ਭਰਪੂਰ ਪਿਆ ਹੈ, ਪੁਰਖ ਹੈ, ਉਹ ਤੇ ਹੈ ਹੀ ਹੈ। ਬਟ that energy or that entity ਜਿਹਦੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਪਾਤਸ਼ਾਹ ਐਜ਼ ਕੁਆਲਿਟੀਜ਼ ਦੇ ਕੇ ਆਏ ਨੇ ਪਿੱਛੇ, ਉਹ ਤੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਕੰਪਰੀਹੈਂਸ਼ਨ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਹਰ ਹੈ ਨਾ। ਅਗਰ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਕੰਪਰੀਹੈਂਡ ਕਰ ਲਿਆ ਤੇ ਫਿਰ ਤੇ ਅਸੀਂ ਉਸ ਐਂਟੀਟੀ ਤੋਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਲੰਘ ਗਏ ਨਾ। ਸੋ ਉਹ ਐਂਟੀਟੀ ਨੂੰ ਮੈਂ ਸੋਚਦਾ हार मान लेनी चाहिए कि ठीक है ये ਉਹਦੇ एट्रीब्यूट्स ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ, पर वो एंटिटी ਨੂੰ पूरा ग्रिप ले लेना या वो एंटिटी ਨੂੰ पूरा समझ लेना, ये साडी समझ तो मतलब ये साडी इमेजिनेशन भी करना कि कॉम्प्रीहेंशन में आ जाएगा, वो भी मेरी समझ विच गल। सो आई थिंक anything other than that entity will keep coming and going. हार मनु इत्थे हार जापदी कि ਇਹ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਮਹਾਰਾਜ ਐਟਰੀਬਿਊਟਸ ਦੇ ਗਏ ਨੇ, but that is all we can understand and these are axioms. ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਲਿਮਿਟ ਤੋਂ ਅੱਗੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਨਰੇਟ ਜ਼ਰੂਰ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਕਿ ਗੁਰੂ ਨਾਨਕ ਪਾਤਸ਼ਾਹ ਐਕਸੀਅਮ ਦੇ ਗਏ ਨੇ ਵੀ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ਾਂ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ, ਪਰ ਇਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਿਯੋਂਡ ਕੀ ਹੈ I don't think we can even attempt.
So if the participants are agreeable, can we move on to Sahiband?